what we are going to be doing is if we go into our Buzz page, and let me open up our Buzz page here. Oh, the screen won't let me look. There we go. So when we get into our Buzz page at the third period social studies, we're going to be under quarter 3 assignments and week of February 1st, and then Thursday's folder. So in Thursday's folder here, we have a couple of different things that we're going to take a look at. So we're talking about the New England colonies. So what were the New England colonies, and what were some of the differences between the other colonies that were around within the original 13 colonies? So there's a teach it and a read it about the New England colonies. So the read it goes through just some characteristics about the New England colonies. What did they do? What did they grow? How did they survive? How were their relationship with Native Americans? Okay, who were the people there? Why did they come there? So we'll talk about all about that in our slideshow today. Then you have a watch it, which you can watch. We'll watch at the end of class to kind of wrap up our lesson with the New England colonies. Then there's a play it game, which is kind of a cool interactive game. It seems like I haven't played it yet, but it looks pretty cool. It's where you're dueling, you're battling, it sounds like. So it says, let's look at it, what it says. Space-time duel, hyper duel, turbo edition. So it looks like you're picking somebody to duel against. So that's kind of a cool feature. Let me go back here. There we go. So you can play that duel game. I went back too far. That's just another interactive activity that goes along with some information that we're going to learn about today. And then you have our show it's there, and then the slideshow as well. So you have access to the slideshow. So let's take a look at the show it, because we'll answer the show it as we go throughout today's lesson. So there are 8 questions, with 6 of them being multiple choice, and then 2 short answer questions that'll help us answer. So let me just read through them real quickly, and then we'll get to our slideshow. All righty. So with our number 1, it says the New England colonies were initially established so that settlers could gain what? So what were settlers coming over to the New England colonies to help try to gain? So which one of these things here? Okay. Then number 2, it says the Pilgrims were led by who? So who was the leader of the Pilgrims? What was his name? And they helped establish the Plymouth colony in 1620. Then number 3, it says the Puritans were led by who? So who did the Puritans, who were they led by? So the Puritans and the Pilgrims are 2 different groups of people. So we're taking a look at who were the 2 leaders of those 2 groups. Then number 4, it says the Puritans settled on a peninsula in Massachusetts Bay and named their settlement what? So what was the name of the Puritan settlement? Then number 5, it says true or false. In 1634, Boston became the largest city in the English colonies by population. So is that a true or a false statement? Then our last multiple choice, number 6, it says, who helped establish the New Hampshire colony? So who helped establish the New Hampshire colony? So who helped found the New Hampshire colony? So which gentleman was that? All righty. Now what's funny here is there's a lot of people that we're talking about who were named John. So a lot of these Englishmen were named John. So we have to kind of decipher and look through the first and last name, make sure we're picking the correct John there. Or it's someone who's not named John is a possible answer too. Then our 2 short answer questions. So number 7, it says, why was education important to the colonists in the New England colonies? So basically, what did children do when they went to school? Why was it important? They learned 2 things, 2 different things here. So it's a lot different than our schooling today. So we'll take a look at what was the schooling like, education like in the New England colonies. So why was it important? We'll talk about that. And then number 8, it says, what are the names of the 4 New England colonies? So this one, you're gonna have to use the map here. And you said the New England colonies are in green. So we go up to the green section here, and there's 4 New England colonies. So you're just giving me the names of those 4 New England colonies. You're just typing it in right there, okay? So we're gonna do the show it together as we're going through the slideshow. So you guys can have the show it open, and then I'll open up the slideshow here. There we go. And then we'll get through our lesson, and then we'll kind of wrap up from there, okay? So let's talk about the New England colonies. Once we get back to our beginning, there we go, New England colonies. All righty. So the New England colonies. So like I said, today we're going to talk about the New England colonies. Then tomorrow we're going to talk about the middle colonies. And then next week we'll talk about the southern colonies. So these are the 3 sections that the 13 colonies were divided up into. So there's 4 colonies that were a part of the New England colonies. And the reason why they're grouped up into 3 sections is because they share some similar characteristics. So let's take a look at the characteristics that these colonies share that are a part of New England. So characteristics of the New England colonies. So the Pilgrims, they were the first people to colonize in the America from England. So the first English colonizers were the Pilgrims. And these were like the first group that came over and kind of settled in the New England region. So we have the settlement of Jamestown and Roanoke before them, but the Pilgrims were the first ones to settle in the New England region, the New England zone. So the New England colonies, they were mainly established to gain religious freedom from England. So that'll help you answer number 1. The New England colonies were mainly established so that settlers could gain religious freedom. So the big reason why a lot of these settlers were coming over from England was because they needed to escape the pressures of practicing Catholicism, so being a Catholic in England. So if you, by the religion in England, you needed to do exactly what you were told by practicing the religion, doing these strict things. And if you didn't do it, then you were kind of exiled. You were kind of kicked out of the society. So these people, these Pilgrims and the Puritans we'll talk about, the people that were coming over to the New England colonies, they were mainly escaping England because they wanted to escape the pressures of practicing religion so strictly. So they wanted to practice religion in a different, more unique way and practice their own way. So they came over to the New World to set up a new idea of how to practice religion. So they weren't pressured to practice religion a certain way. They could practice religion the way that they wanted to. All right, so that was the main reason why they initially established these settlements in New England, was to gain religious freedom. And then the Pilgrims, so the Pilgrims were that first group. They were led by a gentleman named William Bradford, and he helped establish the Plymouth colony in 1620. So that'll help you answer number 2 on your show it. So William Bradford was the leader of the Pilgrims, and he helped establish Plymouth colony, so basically where Plymouth Rock was located. The Plymouth colony, which helped grow and grow into a large English settlement as they were continuing to grow. So your answer for number 2 would be William Bradford. So the leader of the Pilgrims would be William Bradford, mainly settling here in Plymouth colony along the coastline of the New England region. All righty, so far we've answered questions number 1 and number 2. And then the early years. So what was the early life like for the Pilgrims? So the early life was very, very difficult because these Pilgrims were sailing across the Atlantic Ocean with only a limited amount of supplies. And once they got to here in the New World, they basically had to use their supplies wisely and then try to figure out ways to gather more supplies, to gather more food, to gather more clothing, to gather more resources to help them build different houses and buildings. So they needed to kind of just start brand new and figure out how to survive here in the New World. And they were basically on their own. So the Pilgrims struggled very, very hard at first because they arrived and then they experienced this harsh winter. So when you think about in New England, in the northeast portion of the United States, they get very harsh winters. So a lot of snowfall, a lot of cold temperatures. So think about the snowfall that we just got here in Ohio, where we just got a couple inches. Recently in New York and in the New England region, they almost got 2 to 3 feet of snow. So they got 2 to 3 feet of snow, which are in some cases almost 4 feet of snow. So think about almost getting up to your head level of how much snow they got in New England. So in New England area, they still get snow like this today, where they get just bunches, big piles of snow, very cold temperatures. And so the Pilgrims were not able to adapt to that harsh winter. So almost half of them actually died the first winter because they didn't have the necessary food, clothing, and materials to survive the winter. Okay, so they needed help, and they got help from a local Native American tribe. So they reached out to the Native American tribe, and the tribe was called the Wampanoag. So the Wampanoag tribe was the local tribe in this region, and they reached out to the Pilgrims, and the Pilgrims reached out to them, and they basically formed this relationship. So they formed this relationship where they would help each other. So they would offer up gifts to one another and kind of help each other along. So the Wampanoag would help show the Pilgrims how to live and survive here in the New World. And the Pilgrims showed the Wampanoag some different resources and goods that they'd never seen before that helped them kind of navigate their life in Europe. So the Wampanoag tribe was very kind and showed the Pilgrims the best way to hunt and fish, as well as how to grow corn. So they showed them how to survive and how to hunt and fish different animals and how to grow corn. So corn became the main crop that was grown between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. And in that fall, they actually celebrated the famous story of celebrating the first Thanksgiving, where they had a huge feast, played games, sang, and danced. So that's where we get our first Thanksgiving, that first original Thanksgiving story. And that's between the Wampanoag tribe and then you have the Pilgrims as well. And then they also ate some different food and materials in the Thanksgiving feast. So you have the deer, duck, lobster, cornbread, pumpkins, squash, berries, and plums, which was all feasted upon during this Thanksgiving feast between these two, the Native Americans and the Pilgrims here. So so these two groups, Thanksgiving kind of helped create the ways of joining together and help show the relationship between the Native Americans and the colonists that were traveling over here to the New World. All righty. And then you get to the Puritans. So the Puritans were another group of travelers that were coming over from England. So they, again, unlike the Pilgrims, the Puritans were trying to purify the Catholic Church. They were trying to purify different ways of the Catholic Church. That's where they get their name from. So in 1630, the Puritans, they were led under the leadership of John Winthrop. So John Winthrop led the Puritans. So that'll help you answer number 3. So John Winthrop led the Puritans. So John Winthrop was the leader of the Puritans, and they immigrated to New England. So they came into the New England area region as well. And the reason why they came to the New England area was, again, searching for religious freedom. So this became a big deal to the New England people, as a lot of people were escaping New England, escaping England, coming over to the New England area and basically to escape the religious pressures. So they wanted to have religious freedom. So again, the Puritans were coming over, led by John Winthrop, and they settled on the peninsula in Massachusetts Bay that they called Boston. So that'll help you answer number 4. So they settled on this peninsula in Massachusetts Bay, and they called it Boston. Their settlement was called Boston. All righty. And in Boston, this became a very important destination because a lot of ships would travel throughout this bay to connect to the river and down near the Atlantic Ocean. They would travel near Boston. And so Boston became a major port where a lot of ships would sail to, kind of trade their goods, restock their goods, trade different valuables, kind of stop there and relax.
What was the first and second one?
So the first one was religious freedom.
Okay.
And the second one was William Bradford.
Okay.
So Boston, Boston would become a growing and growing city as more and more people came to Boston and more ships traveled to Boston. So it continues to grow, and eventually they would call this colony the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And then eventually, actually, the Massachusetts Bay Colony would grow rapidly and thrived on fishing, fur trading, and shipbuilding. So a lot of people would come to the Massachusetts Bay Colony to fish, to trade furs, to trade different resources, and then also to build ships. So shipbuilding becomes a very popular job in the new colonies here, in the New England colonies, because as more and more people are coming, ships became the main way to travel from place to place. So if you build, you try to build as many ships as you can to help as many people travel up and down the coast and along rivers because that was the fastest way to travel. All righty. And then we talked about Boston. So by 1634, Boston actually became the largest city in the English colonies. So that'll help you answer number 5 on your show it. So by 1634, Boston became the largest city in the New England or the English colonies, the New England colonies. So Boston would continue to grow, and Boston became a huge city in the New World. And that's why it's still such a big city today, is because of the location of Boston and the amount of people that started to travel there and settle in this area. So it only took about 4 years before Boston became the largest city in the English colonies. So that'll be answer number 5 there. Then let's talk about the other little colonies that are there. So you have the New Hampshire colony. So the New Hampshire colony was established in 1630 as well by John Mason. So John Mason set up this New Hampshire colony, basically dividing this land and calling it New Hampshire. And so that'll help you answer number 6 on your show it. So John Mason, remember all these Johns that we have to learn about. John Mason was the founder. He helped establish the New Hampshire colony, John Mason. And the reason why he established the New Hampshire colony was it created, for those individuals feeling constricted by economic and religious rules. So he helped kind of draw people away from England and the other colonies, and they could practice their own religion in the New Hampshire colony, and they would be free of kind of economic rule as well. Okay. So they would be free to kind of trade any items that they wanted to, be able to buy any items that they wanted to, be able to sell any items that they wanted to without going through a higher government official. So in England, they would have to first talk to the government leaders before they were able to trade a specific good. So John Mason set up this idea in New Hampshire where you could trade and buy and sell as goods as you please. So you weren't constrained by these rules that you had to follow. So you could practice your own ways of trading goods and your own religious ways as well. So these rules helped draw people because you needed people to come to the New Hampshire colony in order for it to grow. So these rules help people come to the New Hampshire colony because it helped draw people to this type of lifestyle. Then you get to the Rhode Island colony. So the Rhode Island colony was founded in 1636, and the Rhode Island colony was established by Roger Williams. And again, these individuals were searching for religious freedom. So the individuals that were coming to Rhode Island were still searching for religious freedom. So they were trying to get away from the constraints that the England had about practicing religion a certain way, an exact way. And so they wanted to practice it freely. And so they would come to Rhode Island and other colonies to help practice their own religion freely. So that became the main reason why a lot of these people came to the New England region. And then the last one would be Connecticut. So in 1636, the Connecticut colony was established by Thomas Hooker, and it was created for people looking again for economic and religious freedom. So all of these colonies in the New England region were trying to help people escape the religious constraints in England. And so they set up these colonies based on the idea that you could practice your religion and practice different economic trading and buying and selling goods as freely as you would like, So you had the freedom to practice religion how you would like, and the freedom to practice trading and buying different goods as you would like as well. So that became the main idea of these New England colonies. So what was kind of their town set up like? So how was their structure of their colonial towns? What did it look like? So each family in the town had their own land. So every family had their own kind of section of land. And on that land, they had to buy, or they had to build their own house and a farm. So they had to build their own house and a farm on their land. So they would often spend most of their time building the house, making the different adjustments and updates to the house, and then have enough land left over so they could have a farm as well to be able to grow their own food and to provide livestock an area to kind of graze as well. So the center of town was known as the meeting house. And the meeting house was basically the church. So the church was the center of town because a lot of these towns were set up on religious freedom. And so religion became the kind of the center way of life in these New England towns. Yes, Emily.
What if you don't know how to build a house?
Then some other families would help you. So mainly it would be families working together to build houses. So it wouldn't just be your family just building the house. Good question. So the church became the middle of the town, and in the church, they used the church basically for all types of different meetings and worship services. So the church became the spot for religious services, town meetings to decide where the land would be divided up, how it would be divided up, who owned the land. It would be a way to settle disputes between people of what land was theirs. And just that became the main meeting spot, was the church in the center of town. There was also a place called the Commons. And so the Commons was basically this big field. That's where the animals would graze on the grass and the grain. And then you have houses, shops, and a school that were situated along the edges of the Commons. So along the edges of the field, on the outskirts of the town, you had more houses and shops and even a schoolhouse where the children would go to school along the edges of the Commons. So you're starting to see how this town setup is very similar to the town that we see today, where if you drive through a small town or go through a small town, you'll see kind of the main road has all the main houses, shops, schoolhouse, church, right on the main road. Okay. Then we get to talking about education. So there was just one schoolhouse. So how did the children go to school? So education was extremely important. So this is going to help you answer number 7 on your show it, typed in answer. So the reason why education was important is because people wanted their children to be able to read the Bible and on their own and to understand the laws of the community. So those are the 2 main reasons why children would go to school. They would go to school to be able to read the Bible on their own and to understand the laws of the community. So that's why education was important, because everybody needed to know the laws of the community and you needed to be able to read the Bible. So you could say for number 7, you could say education was important because people needed to know how to read the Bible and to understand the laws of their community. Alrighty. So you could say education was important because people needed to know how to read the Bible and to understand the laws of their community. So the 2 main reasons why these children would go to school were to learn how to read through the Bible, the different verses, and then also how to kind of interact and make sure you're following the rules of the community. So you needed to follow these rules, or else there would be very severe punishments, very harsh punishments, if you did not follow the rules of the community. So the first school was actually built in the colonies in 1635. So almost 400 years ago is when the first school was built here in the United States. So almost 400 years ago is that first schoolhouse was built. So that was the importance of school in the colonies there. And then some other little facts here. So farms were situated on the outside of the town. So outside of the town in the big fields, that's where the farms were located. And farmers worked very hard during the growing season, because during the winter season, the farming became very difficult because of the harsh winters. They couldn't grow anything. So the farmers would spend a lot of their time in spring, summer, and fall growing as much food as they can to help provide enough food for their town. So they would grow things like rye, pumpkins, squash, corn, beans, peas, carrots, and turnips, because the wheat wouldn't grow in this area. So those were kind of all the things that they grew to help feed all of the people within the town. They ate a lot of vegetables during this time as well. And then there was animals that helped on the farm as well, and that would be sheep, pigs, cows, and chickens, which are still helpful animals today. And that's how we get kind of the use out of these animals, still learning about how they use the farm, okay? So farmers were on the outside of town, and the town was situated in the middle, and the farmers would come to town to basically sell off and trade their goods once they grow all of their different types of crops, all righty? And then our last thing is talking about what were the towns like on the coast. So if you lived on the water, along the water, like near a bay or a river or an ocean, your life was different than life in the middle of the New England colonies. So in the coast towns, they mainly lived by fishing, whaling, and shipbuilding. So they fished for different fish in the rivers and in the ocean. They would also go whaling. So whaling was the way of hunting whales. And they would actually, whale hunters would actually use their whale oil. So there was oils found in whale, and that would be used to light lamps. So in order to have light at night, you needed whale oil. And so in order to get that oil, you needed to hunt down these whales and to capture that oil off the whales. So whaling became a very popular way of life in the New England colonies. And then as the whaling business flourished, whalers went further out into the ocean, which increased the need for more ships to be built. So as more and more people needed to go out into the ocean to kind of capture and hunt down these whales for oil, they had to be able to build as many ships as possible. So they kept building ships, and all these ships were made out of wood. So they had to carve out that wood, make it to the exact shape that it needed to be, and that's how they would build these ships in a specific amount of time. All righty. So that's the kind of the big difference between the coastal towns and then the towns that were in the mainland. Okay, so that's the end of our slideshow there. But then looking back at our show it, if you look back there, we need to answer the last question, which would be number 8. And number 8, it says, what are the names of the 4 New England colonies? So we have to look at the green section on the map. So what are the names of our 4 English colonies? Who can give me one answer for that one? Emily, what's one of them?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire's one of them. Good. So New Hampshire's one of the colonies. Kayla, what's another one?
Connecticut. Connecticut.
Connecticut, good. Hang on, I'm just listening to this announcement.
You're going to report to the fandom for IE today. Liza Kadama, Angela Catalota,
Just a second, I gotta listen.
Caitlin Kumpel, Ashley Lindow, Mensa, Hamza Mohammed, Solomon Mohammed, Constanza Perez, Lainey Peters, Karina Ciel, Jesse Picacho, Stephen Porter, Evan Sandy, Pooja Sarkey, Natalia Smith, Sophia Smith, Atticus Stevens, Jalen Stewart,
Almost done.
Jaden Taylor, Stuart Stappa, and Carter Wood. Thank you.
All right. So we have Connecticut. What's another one that we need for our New England colonies? Emmeline, what's another one? We Connecticut, New Hampshire.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, good. So Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. And what's our last one there? What do we think? What's our last one, Kylie?
Massachusetts.
Perfect, Massachusetts. So then your 4 answers for number 8 would be New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. All righty.